I'm Michael Bain, and welcome to Triggered, coming to you this week, as always, from the secret hidden bunker in the Rocky Mountains and Dragon House Studios, and brought to you this week by Thesis, as imported by STS Imports. I'm a little tired this week because I spent the weekend in Wyoming at Wyoming Tactical's Long Range class. That's my friend Jason Crotrose, whose name I've mispronounced a million different ways, class on long-range shooting, and it's held at a really interesting facility. It is the Tactical Solutions International facility in a little bitty town in northern Wyoming. It's primarily a special forces military-oriented facility, but it is great for long-range shooting. And the reason that I wanted to go to that class was, yes, I want to improve my long-range skills, but it was to hammer out this gun, which you've seen for about a year and a half. It's been the longest build I've ever been in. It is a Wilson Combat 308 AR-10 platform with a Faxon match barrel, 1 in 10 match barrel, and a JP large break. The gun was held up for a while because of a shortage of AR parts. It was held up because I need a special tool to torque for this like Wilson Combat 4-end, but got it built, put a few rounds through it, really liked it, but I wanted to ring it out, and that's why I took it to Wyoming. And had some interesting friends there with me. Kevin Creighton, who's a dear friend of mine, very dear friend of mine. He is now the digital editor of Shooting Illustrated, and he was there to ring out a 224 Valkyrie, which I believe was also built on a Wilson Combat upper. Also, Rob Pincus was there with a thumper. Rob bought a Nemo 300 Win Mag AR-type platform gun. Boy, that was a great gun to shoot. This is the gear that I used, except for the scope. The scope that I used, which was a Lucid second focal plane, I think 6-24, a friend of mine wanted to borrow it. I left it up in Wyoming. This is a 3-18 Lucid first focal plane. On the scope, I used a quick detach mount that I've used for probably the last 15 years, and that quick detach mount came back to bite me in the butt. We'll talk about that a little later. Typically, this is SIG rangefinder, work really super well. Use Hornady ammunition, both the black and the classic fallback, what's left of my steel match 308 ammunition. The tripod here is from Medieval Enterprises, and it worked really well. It's absolutely solid platform. Caldwell bag, and also bags from Armageddon Gear. Essentially, my long-range collection of bags, and I think everybody who shoots long-range has that collection. But first thing I want to say is absolutely great class. One of the things that Jason did that I think is super is he pushes you hard. A lot of times in a long distance class, you don't really get out to pass, say, 500-600 yards for several days. But we kind of started at 700 yards and pushed from there. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to see how the gun ran, and I wanted to see how I ran running the gun, if that makes sense. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little about some of the exercises we did and how well the gun did, which I'm very happy. Welcome back to Triggered, where we're talking about Wyoming Tactical's long-range class. Wyoming Tactical is a really great unknown asset. They do great classes. Interesting enough, Jason mixed it up. There's some long-range shooting where you're working with the rifle, you're acquiring targets, you're lasering those targets, you're working out the ballistics. I use Strelok as the ballistic program pretty consistently throughout this whole class. Of course, it's on my phone, and it's very helpful, especially when you're using a second focal plane scope, because essentially on the really long shots, you're having to adjust your magnification. For example, on the longest shots that I took, I had to wind my magnification all the way down from 24x to 6x to be able to get a solution. And you can see from the graphic of how much holdover I had to do on 1,200-yard shot. Jason mixed in some essentially NRL hunter type stages where it would be prone, table, prone, table, prone. Lots of different challenges, and that's what you want, a lot of different challenges. This gun ran great. I had one failure to feed, and it was the end of the first day. The gun was dirty, it was hot, fill in the blank, and it might have been my manipulation of the gun because I was dirty, I was hot, I was tired. But otherwise, it ran like a champ. It did everything I asked of it. One of the things I'm proudest of is on the third day, a cold bore 1,200-yard hit, which 1,200 yards a long way out there. For 308, I actually believe the 308 left the atmosphere and dropped in like this because the hit on the target was not a clean hit, but it was in fact a scratch down the target, showing that the bullet landed like that. So this kind of performance to me tells me that essentially this gun is doing exactly what it was I built it to do, which is I wanted an all-around AR-10 308 that would reach out to 1,000 yards, but at the same time be really excellent within that framework between 1,000 yards and say 25 yards. And so far this gun has performed. I believe I ran about 320 308 match rounds. Yes, I'm going to have to actually remortgage the house to be able to get those rounds. Now, thankfully, Hornady helped me out on that. I've used Hornady ammunition almost exclusively for a long time. It's very, very, very good. So, when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to change on this gun. Stay with us. This week's Triggered is brought to you by Armscore, Rock Island Armory. What's your passion? Taurus USA. Always ready, always bring it. Stoger, everyday tough. SDS Imports and the Thesis PX9. Thesis means quality. Hunter's HD Gold. They change so you don't have to. Welcome back to Triggered, and I'm going to tell you what I was going to change. Well, first, I've already changed scope and scope mounts. I think that detachable scope mounts on a heavy recoiling rifle are maybe not the way you would want to go, especially when you're using basically inexpensive mounts. On a rifle that you're going to shoot a long range, and you spend a lot of money to go here to shoot a long range, the best scope mounts you can buy are barely good enough. These scope mounts here are made extra sturdy. They're all torqued now specifically according to. Also, it's a front focal plane scope. That's a little bit easier for me to pick up. Now, second focal plane, where your reticle stays the same size regardless of your magnification, that's what I prefer for hunting. And I do that for a lot of reasons. That's maybe a whole separate show. But for competition and training, I'm going to stay with front focal plane mil-dot scope. Other thing I'm going to change, a new stock. You'll notice this classy modification. That's a big chunk of cardboard duct taped to the stock and topped with a piece of moleskin to keep it from chewing up my cheek, to raise my cheek to the right level for the scope. Typically, we're running fairly high rings on these things. Otherwise, I'm very happy with it. A lot of people wish I'd changed that brake. A lot of people said the brake was so vicious they wish they could have actually shot from a different town. But other than that, as a package, this worked. And as I said, we operated from 500 to 1,270 yards over the course of 3 days, and the gun was a rock. So, you guys have seen me build it, you guys have seen me agonize over it, and now you guys have seen me use it. So it was a lot of fun, that entire process is. We have a very special build coming up, by the way, on Triggered. So, as always, you can find us on michaelbain.tv. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Rumble. We'll have links for everything, of course, on michaelbain.tv. This is Triggered, brought to you this week by Thesis SDS Imports. I'm Michael Bain, and we will see you next week. day.